Hi, I'm Steve Linde. Welcome to the JNS studios. And with me today is Sammy Yahood. And Sammy, you'll tell us who you are.
Steve, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. My name is Samuel. I've been known by Sammy Yahood for the last 18 months, 2 years. And I'm born and raised in northwest London with most of the Jews in the UK. And from a pretty privileged background, bubbled by my community until my young adulthood. And I've slowly evolved into somebody who likes to spend most of his time fighting for the Jewish community.
So would you call yourself as social media activist?
I don't particularly like to use those sort of terms or content creator or any of those terms because I associate them with other things. But I am all of those things: a content creator, an activist, an influencer. But I use my social media to get my message and to inspire. It's not my preferred way of doing things, but I understand that that's the way we've got to do things to be the most efficient and effective at inspiring.
And now you've made aliyah, and you've really changed your focus since October 7th.
Yes, so before October the 7th, I was spending a lot of time volunteering in the community for a few years, teaching Krav Maga and self-defense to the Jewish community in London. And as it was slowly but steadily ramping up visibly, the antisemitism and the indoctrination from the media and the blatant libels from publications such as the BBC, I got more and more involved. And once October the 7th happened, nothing ever went back to the same. I went into my then career, which was in construction and real estate. I went to the office on the Monday morning, 2 days later, and I felt like people were treading on eggshells around me. I felt like I was being punished for what had happened to our people. So I never saw anything the same again. And I very shortly after that turned to doing more than just the security and teaching self-defense. I had to use my voice. I felt like I had a responsibility.
So how do you see your mission in life at the moment?
My mission in life is, I really do believe I have a responsibility to fight for the Jewish people, and in any way that I can. I don't particularly like attention, or as we were speaking about earlier, I don't particularly like being on camera. But I feel like it's the best way, especially today. We have to get our voices out there. And whereas most people love to explain, which is where the word Hasbara comes from, I have a problem with Hasbara because people love to explain Israel's position and to make excuses, etc., etc. But in my opinion, that already puts us on the back foot. If you start by explaining why we're not in the wrong or why we deserve to exist, people lose respect for it immediately. What I want to do, and what I've been trying to do very shortly after I started my content, is to inspire the Jews, to encourage Jews and freedom lovers alike in the diaspora outside of Israel to take responsibility for their own lives and for the fight themselves.
So what is your message to Jews in the diaspora?
I've just written an article surrounding my general message. I've called it Priorities. And it's essentially all about how we're living in a bubble of comfort and an illusion of peace. We were told that the Cold War ended in 1991, and all of a sudden these Axis powers, they no longer hate everything we stand for, which is nonsense, right? We have just been experiencing a more covert attack on everything we stand for and live for. And we're seeing that come to fruition now in the streets, at music festivals and the like. So my main objective is to wake people up. And if I have to shake them, I will, quite literally. And I feel like my writing is a bit shaking. That's how I like to write. I've only recently started writing, but I feel like I write in a similar way to the way I speak. I'm very blunt. I don't beat around the bush, which most British people like to do. And I like to give clear instruction. We are living with outdated priorities for life. We like to think that our mortgage, our education, and our pension are the most important things in life and in society, when really what we understand here, because we understand the existential threat and that it's not going away, we understand that our family, our love, and our safety are the top priorities, rather than our salary and our pension, which we may or may not get in 40, 50 years down the line.
So you brought up music festivals, and just recently there was this music festival in England where they chanted "Death to the IDF." How did that make you feel?
Totally unsurprised. Sickened, but totally unsurprised. As I said, before October the 7th, about 2-3 years before, I started teaching self-defense to the Jewish community. And I was doing security on street corners outside of synagogues, etc., etc. And I was witnessing a very steady but sure increase in anti-Semitism. And I really credit that to the BBC almost entirely. For example, every Ramadan, for the 3 years before October the 7th, you'd see 80,000 peaceful worshippers at the Al-Aqsa compound, right? And then you'd have 200 of them who would store rocks and projectiles and explosives in the shrine there, the Dome of the Rock. And of course, that means the IDF have to go in their stormtrooper outfits and arrest these people, correct? Because otherwise these rocks are going to be thrown down at the Jews praying at the Kotel. But I don't believe the rocks were actually intended to be thrown on the Jews at the Kotel. They were intended for the BBC cameramen and women to go in there and get the IDF in their stormtrooper outfit. And the headline read, every year for 3 years before October the 7th, it read, IDF storms mosque during Ramadan and arrests worshippers. And that is incitement to violence against Jews. And we saw it. The next day, I saw it on the streets. I saw a car driving past the synagogue. They leaned out the window with their fake Palestine flag, and they shouted some horrendous things at Jewish kids on the street corner. I reported their number plate and got them arrested 10 minutes later. But as this kept progressing, I kept feeling like I wasn't doing enough, which is why, despite not being so keen on attention or being on camera, I had a responsibility.
So would you say that this has brought you out of your comfort zone and into a different sphere of influence, but you still left your family in England, and that's one of the reasons why you actually go by the pseudonym Sammy Yahood?
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned the comfort zone. But I'll talk about my pseudonym first. My family is of mixed heritage. I have some Mizrahi from Egypt and Syria, but mostly Ashkenazi. And I did, just before October the 7th, I went traveling and I visited places like Egypt and Jordan. And I look somewhat Egyptian to Egyptians on the ground, as they told me. So I kind of picked up that name as an idea. But the reason I use a pseudonym is because the Islamists in the UK, they love to send litigation in the post and all of these things. I know, I'm kidding. That's the Jews. We like to do the litigation. They like to send people to cut off the heads of those that disagree with them. So we have slightly different ways of going about things. But to go back to the comfort zone, that is for me everything. Jewish or not Jewish, diaspora and the Western world, the freedom lovers, this is where society has gone wrong. Since the end of World War II, you look at America, and America's influenced all of the culture around the world, especially the West. The entire society has been shaped around comfort and comfortability, convenience, where you've got drive-throughs, drive-through banks, drive-through food, drive-through this and that. Everything is comfort-based. And when you do that, when you're so comfortable, you become complacent. And when you live a life centered around comfort, you can't actually be grateful or appreciate true happiness because you don't appreciate true difficulty. And that's why we see kids and adults with uncontrollably poor mental health, the inability to think rationally or to reason with argument or even to have a reasonable debate on any sort of topic. And I'm not just trying to get through to the Jews with this argument. I obviously have my viewpoints through a Jewish lens. But I too was guilty up until the age of 16. I was totally encapsulated by my Jewish bubble. Jewish school, Jewish scouts, bar mitzvah. I used to go and blow the shofar for the elderly who couldn't make it to shul on Rosh Hashanah. So I was volunteering from a young age and I was community-minded from a young age. But I dropped Ivrit at school as soon as I possibly could because I placed no importance in it whatsoever. I didn't understand how special we were as a people because that's all I understood about the world. I didn't know that there was a wider world. You see that when you don't understand that there's difficulty and that there is bigger things to your problems and to your reality, there's no way you can possibly appreciate your reality. And if in passing someone said to me, if you could use one word to describe or to help someone fix their life or to fix society, I'd use the one word comfort. Because if someone with a reasonable mind sits down and thinks of the word comfort, and if they're honest with themselves, comfort and the inability to step out of that comfort zone is what's stopping people from doing everything.
So how do you see the situation in Israel now? I mean, you have already a very big following, and I know that you're planning also to go abroad and speak. But who is your target audience, and what do you tell them about the situation now in Israel?
So I often get described as right-wing by many people, and I reject that largely. I mean, first of all, I have a surprising number of what would be described as liberal or leftists that follow me and vocally support my work. And that's because I think that message of stepping out of your comfort zone is what people want to hear, whether it's subconsciously or consciously. They want to hear that because it's inspiring, it's motivating. And people today, now more than ever, struggle to find motivation. We are attacking our drive and dopamine systems with our TikToks and our sugar rushes to the point where we can't figure out how to motivate ourselves. So people want to hear that message. But my target audience is, as I said, freedom lovers and the Jewish people. Mm-hmm. And I must say, I do focus on the diaspora of the Jewish people more than in Israel, because as I said, in Israel, we understand more so. We still have problems with people that don't, and cultures that don't. But we understand that the existential threat leads us to having our priorities in the right order. And I think that was actually a big reason for making aliyah. In Britain, the working culture is very toxic. As I said, the priorities for life are totally upside down. Here, you know you're living life every second of the day.
So who are your heroes?
It's a really difficult question to answer. But I've been thinking about this recently, and I actually watched a show. Can I promote a show?
Sure.
Called Churchill at War. Winston Churchill, Sir Winston Churchill. He's got a lot of bad press from bad actors that want to subvert the true history. He was one of the most important figures in modern times, and he was the man of the hour. If someone like that didn't come about, if we had Neville Chamberlain and you tried to negotiate with the devil, as people have been pushing for to negotiate with Hamas, negotiate with people, as Golda Meir said, you cannot negotiate with someone who's come to kill you. And you have to have someone who understands that unequivocally, unambiguously. And the comfort, just to go back to that, what we've had is we've had the inability to listen to our enemies. The left has the inability to listen to the Islamists. They tell us plain and simple, but the chickens for KFC, the quiz for Palestine is the perfect example. These people are not able to listen to the truth. They attach their emotion to the arguments. But to get back to who's my hero and why Winston Churchill, he famously rode a white horse during the Boer War. To draw attention to himself. So I feel like that's a much more extreme version of myself and what I've been known to do.
Do you see any parallel between Winston Churchill and Benjamin Netanyahu?
In many ways, yes. He got some terrible press. Winston Churchill was, what most people don't know, is he was, before the war, he was ostracized from politics multiple times. He got so far ostracized that he had to go back to the battlefield to prove himself again, to then go back to the House of Commons. He crossed the floor from the left to the right, from the Conservatives to Labour twice. He understood the game, which is what Benjamin Netanyahu really does. You have to understand the game. You have to play the game to get to the top. And people really give Bibi a horrible time for it. And unfortunately, you have to do an element of pandering and playing the game to get to the position where you're the decision maker. And it's taken me a long time to get to this conclusion because there's so much mess surrounding the politics in Israel. And I've only been here for 6 months officially. But I'm proud to say that I'm very, very grateful to have him as the leader during these crunch times.
What do you see as a young immigrant to Israel from England as the best way to counter anti-Semitism, what you call Jew hatred, anti-Zionism in the world today?
It's a difficult question because my honest answer, and I'll give you my blunt and honest answer. I think most of the diaspora is doomed. Jabotinsky famously said, liquidate the diaspora or the diaspora will liquidate you. And I think America, we have a big stake and a big influence and a big responsibility to fight for America. But you see the New Yorks and the LA community of Jews pandering towards the Islamist and the leftist leaders. So I think the fight in them is so far gone that I struggle to get through to any individuals of that orientation. But the way to fight it is the way we fought it in the 20s, all the way up till the 90s, which was, to put it bluntly, to go to these rallies and physically attack them, to make them uncomfortable. We had people like Mayor Lansky. We had people like Gerald Ronson in the UK. We had proper anti-fascist, proper leftist groups that did not put up with people who unequivocally said, we are coming here to kill you. And we understood our enemy. And we understood the only language which they speak, which is intimidation and bullying. And these people are weak. And that's what I tried to demonstrate with my content or with my actions, such as going to these encampments at universities of Islamists and waking them up at 4 a.m. and screaming in their faces and telling them that they're terrorists, because they know that they are. But I have to show them that you should not be comfortable sitting here. You're not comfortable. We're out for you. But they're so comfortable because no one will get in their faces. And a big part of why I started what I was doing is because I wanted to show how easy it is to make these people uncomfortable. And I believe that's the only way to stop this. And it's so far gone. I don't know if there is any way. And that's not just the Jews. It sounds like I'm blaming the comfort in the Jewish community for this. The West is equally as guilty. And it's a difficult reality to come to terms with.
So, I mean, maybe it's your Krav Maga background, but so you're a warrior, you're a fighter.
I haven't always been. I was training kickboxing from about the age of 10. And it took me, I must have given it up at age 15. I never really liked it. I was always flinched before I was hit in the face. But then I left the Jewish bubble. I went to a public college and I realized we're so vulnerable. Not only, I was still 5'6" at the time and tiny. So I went straight back to kickboxing and I really stepped into the fire because that's the only way to deal with discomfort is you step into it, lean into it, and you realize the fire is not as hot as it seems. And also I realized that I can't be in a room where people are libeling my extended family, the Jewish people or Israel, without having something meaningful to say in response. That was equally as important a method of self-defense as the physical. So at that moment, I started working towards being a fighter in every corner of life, but it's not natural. People talk about natural courage. There's not really such thing. It's nurture. You have to put yourself through it.
So as we come to the end of the interview, let me ask you this. What are your plans for the future? And are you an optimist? Do you think that we have a bright future ahead of us?
My plans for the future are honestly just to continue motivating and inspiring the Jewish people and freedom lovers. We have to fight for what we have taken for granted for decades, for generations. There's been about 1.5 million years of human history, and hardly 100 of those have been years of abundance and true freedom. Most of human history is brutal violence, colonization, tyranny. And as I said, when I visited places like Egypt and Mexico and Jordan, you realize how lucky you are to be able to speak openly about these topics, to be able to joke about politics, and to be able to order a steak. And we take these things so terribly for granted. That I really want to inspire gratitude, which inspires the fight in people. And I just hope it's not too late. I think describing myself as an optimist would be a stretch. For the Middle East, I really am an optimist. Like I said, we have the right idea of what life means here in Israel, and that's a rarity in the entire world, as far as I've witnessed. And that's a seriously special thing. And I urge the Jewish people around the world not to miss out on that. You know what that means. And for the diaspora, like I said, I have a very pragmatic and blunt way of looking at things. I think the West, especially places like the UK, and as the Minister of Diaspora Affairs here in Israel says, that he recommends the Jews of Europe to leave, because we have to be real with ourselves. When more British Muslims have left to join ISIS than to join the British Armed Forces, I think we look at those facts. We've got to take a step back from what the BBC and what our so-called leaders in Britain are telling us, including the British Jewish publications and leaders. They're just as guilty. The fight in places like Britain has been gaslit into submission, which is why even the Brits aren't fighting. So we have to be real with ourselves. And Americans, it's now or never.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Sammy Yahood, thank you. It's been really interesting talking to you, and thanks for joining us at JNS.
Steve, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.